Welcome all for the 7th edition of the Geoscience Remote Sensing Society Young Professional and ISPRS International Society of Photogrammetry and Remote Sensing Student Consortium Summer School. Well, this year we will start with webinar roundtables and also tutorials with hands-on. So stay tuned in our program. This year, the event is organized by two universities of Santa Catarina, the Santa Catarina State University and UNO Chapecó. The event is sponsored and supported by two international societies, the Geoscience and Remote Sensing Society and the International Society of Photogrammetry and Remote Sensing, and the student branch of each society, the young professionals one and the student consortium one. We also invite you to navigate in our main page to see the welcome videos of our sponsors. So please do it, otherwise we will be fired. The event is also supported by our Santa Catarina State Foundation and by two companies, GeoAssessoria, that will promote a benchmarking dataset in the end of the event, and the Instituto Gilson Volpato de Educação Científica. The event is also supported by different Brazilian institutions and started already on August 12th. So today we will start actually with our fourth webinar, and for that I will invite Professor Tomazelli from the São Paulo State University to take this job of moderating this session. Professor Tomazelli, welcome actually to our event, and thank you for accepting actually this job. So the room is now on your hands. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Geraldo. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, all attendants. We have attendants from all over the world. I am Antonio Tomazelli from São Paulo State University, and I will be the chair of this section. Jorge Centeno from Federal University of Paraná and Cheryl Reis, president of the ISPRS Student Consortium, will be co-chairs of this section. It is my great pleasure to welcome Professor Armin Gruen, our invited speaker this morning. Professor Gruen was graduated in geodetic sciences in 1968 and obtained his doctorate degree in 1974 in photogrammetry, both from the Technical University of Munich. Since 1984, he is professor and head of the chair of photogrammetry and remote sensing at the Institute of Geodesy and Photogrammetry, Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich, Switzerland. Since August 2009, he is retired and now he is with the Institute of Conservation Building Research, Department of Architecture, Zurich. He played a major role in the development of many photogrammetric methods, such as the bundle adjustment based on self-calibration in the 70s. In the early 80s, he developed a very well-known method for adaptive multiple image matching. Professor Gruen also applied his expertise to documenting historical sites, thus making photogrammetry most popular. One of the most significant work was the documentation and virtual reconstruction of the Great Buddha in Afghanistan. He also served as on a number of national and international scientific organizations. Within ISPRS, he was president of Commission 5, second vice president, chair of the Financial Committee, and the chair of the International Scientific Advisory Committee. He has published more than 500 articles and papers, and he is the editor and co-editor of over 21 books and conference proceedings. He has organized and co-organized 35 international conferences and has served as consultant to various government agencies, system manufacturers, and engineering firms. Professor Gruen also has received many awards. Just to cite a few: the Otto von Gruber Gold Medal from ISPRS, the Fairchild Award from the American Society of Photogrammetry and Remote Sensing, the ISPRS Elava Award, and the ISPRS Gold Medal. He has a huge experience in lecturing, researching, and supervising students, and he will be sharing his expertise with us this morning. Professor Gruen will give two lectures, the first one on the White Elephant Club, and then the main conference on how to write a thesis. Professor Gruen, floor is yours. Thank you again for accepting.
Okay, thank you very much for the long introduction. And thank you, all of you, for sharing my presentations here. My main presentation is on how to write a thesis. When I say thesis, I also mean paper, of course, that's included. But before I go into the main presentation, I explain briefly what the White Elephant Club is, because it may not be very well known. The White Elephant has different definitions, whether you are part of the Western or Eastern culture. In the West, if you read Wikipedia, which is heavily dominated by Western culture facts, you read a white elephant is a valuable possession which its owner cannot dispose of and whose cost exceeds its usefulness. So a quite negative definition. But we, I mean the member of the ISPRS White Elephant Club, think we are valuable and we are useful, and we rather prefer the Eastern definition, which symbolizes a noble animal. And in Thailand, even if somebody finds a white elephant, he has to denote it to the king of Thailand. So it's something positive for us, of course. The White Elephant Club is a group of senior officers of ISPRS who are still, some are still active, others have retired already, but they are all very much dedicated to serve the society. It was established in 2004, and it has a president, a secretary, an honorary president. We also had an honorary member, Fred Doyle, who passed away some years ago. And we have something like a corporate identity, which is a Thai silk with white elephants and blue and red backgrounds. I don't have a tie here because it's too warm in Switzerland right now. It's very hot. So what are the activities of White Elephant Club? There are four major areas. First, transfer of technology by organizing seminars and workshops. So this would be one of these activities. Initiating, coordinating, and supporting projects by bringing together users, sponsors, experts. So we act like science and technology brokers. Then we would like to bridge the gap between generations and fostering events to support young scientists and students. This applies also to the current scheme. And we like to initiate and support e-learning activities and so forth. So currently, the club has 27 active members. And what we are offering since a number of years is a seminar which consists basically of three presentations. One is about writing a thesis. This is what I talk about today. One is about proposal writing. Here we had several authors, speakers in the past. And the third one is about presentation techniques, which is usually given by Professor Shunji Murai, previously University of Tokyo. Now, this is a nice picture of members of the White Elephant Club, including partners celebrating the centennial ceremony of ISPS in Vienna 11 years ago. This was 2019, where we spent some time in China, in Guilin. We went to the Li River. We had a very nice excursion, and it was organized by our Chinese friends on behalf of some people who had birthdays, like Professor Konechny had celebrated his 90th birthday, others 80, 75. So today we talk about white elephant, about not really anymore, about thesis writing. And again, thank you very much for listening to this presentation. Now, if there are any questions at this point, I'm happy to answer if I can.
Professor, I have one question.
Yes.
You have, besides this experience in, how can I say, managing research, you have also huge experience in technical matters. For example, you have huge experience with matching, bundle adjustment. Do you also deliver conferences on this technical matter, for example, for the PhD students abroad in several other countries?
The question is whether I support postdoc events.
No. If you can, how can I say, deliver some conferences on technical stuff, more specific technical stuff, for example, bundle adjustment.
I still do. I mean, you have to realize that I retired what was it, 2009, 12 years ago already. But after retirement, I'm still doing projects. I had and still have some major projects. One is in Singapore on 3D city modeling, and one is in Moorea, South Pacific, French Polynesia. It's on very generic environmental modeling. So, and from these projects, I take some results and present them. Yeah, I still give presentation, but I have to say much less than I used to do when I was still fully active.
Okay, thank you.
Now, I really try to support the young people, PhD students, postdocs. So I usually act as a co-author in papers because for them it's more important to be on the first place in a paper. I don't have to publish anymore. I published it.
Okay, thank you. Anyone? Okay, if you don't have any more questions, I think that you can now start presenting the second conference, and then we can accept questions from the audience.
Yes, can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes, it's okay.
Yes, so it's about thesis writing.
Okay.
There are a number of topics before you start writing. What do you have to do? Some guidelines and tips, 9 steps in developing a draft manuscript, checkpoints to consider. There's really a list of checkpoints which you can work through, some general advice, and the best part of thesis writing. And in addition, as appendices, I have information about literature, additional literature, web pages, and writing tips. So if you want to learn more, understand more, then you can use this information as well. Okay, in the Department of Physics, Trinity College Dublin, there was at the message board the following statement. What is how to do research? Research is to know what and how to do it and to make it known. I will focus here in my presentation on the second and on the fourth. Okay, so how to do it, what to do, and to make it known. Because to make it known what you have done, especially if you have done a good job, is as important as to do the job. Because if you cannot communicate your results well, people will not know. You can be the greatest scientist of all in the world. If you cannot communicate, it doesn't help very much. And in fact, some people do a very good job in doing research, but they are very bad in communicating it, writing papers, writing theses, for instance, or giving presentations, and vice versa. There are people around, of course, maybe you know some, who are very good in presentation, but in the background, there is not much good material. Okay, so that's what we do. We talk about these topics. Now, before you start writing a thesis, and remember, again, when I say thesis, I mean also paper, okay? But I will focus now on thesis terminology. So before you start writing, define your topic. First, you have to understand the width of your topic if you picked one already. Because it should be broad enough to address important and interesting issues, but also narrow enough that you don't need too much time, that you can finish the job within the time allotted. And you have to consider that any topic seems to get bigger and bigger once you get into it. When you get deeper into the topic, you see there are so many additional issues, and this is a big danger, that people will leave the main track, the red tape, so to say, and jump into additional issues and lose too much time. Understand the limitations of your situations. It's very important to know to understand what is your environment. Your own capabilities, of course, your motivation. Are you sufficiently motivated? Do you have experience already in this area? Maybe you have to take additional classes to upgrade your knowledge. About supervision, who is your supervisor? The required lab work. How are you dependent on others? It's very important that you will depend on others normally if you work in a lab. So if you need some equipment or software or whatever, then it should be clear to you when this is available or not available, because it may be used by other people. So third, do some previous readings before you do the serious research. Make sure you understand at least roughly what you are getting into. And also study the state of the art of the issue, because in real and good research, you don't redo what people have done before, okay? You jump in at the state of the art and go further, do something new. And for this purpose, you have to understand, you have to know the state of the art, together with your supervisor, of course. So very useful it's to create a timetable so that you can coordinate your work with your other commitments. So some people are very strict with their own timetable, some people are not. But you should know what's going on in your environment, time-wise also. Reading strategies. There are 3 levels of reading. And you should understand that when you get into the issue, you may not know exactly what you are looking for in the beginning, because research is not fully plannable. If it would be, it would not be research. It would be development. That's why we talk about R&D, research and development. Development is better plannable. Research not. You can be in for surprises, positive and negative. So 3 levels of reading. First, read to explore, then read to focus, and finally read to understand. And also read critically. Research is not about believing. This is religion. If you want to believe, you have to sort to religion. Research is not about believing, but about asking questions. Don't believe everything what is written in black on white or in different colors. Not everything which is published is true and correct. And I know that this creates a problem for somebody who has not much experience. But you always have your supervisor whom you can ask for help. So read critically, try to get to the primary sources, because a certain issue may be changed over time, wrongly changed, you know. So try to get back to the guy who did this and that for the first time, okay? Primary sources. Read always. You cannot do enough reading in this area. Especially if you do a PhD thesis. There are so many publications out nowadays because it's so easy to write and to publish. It's very important to know what's going on worldwide, not only in your country, in your environment. And what I always say or said in the past to my PhD student, after 5 years of working on a narrow PhD topic, you should know more than anybody else about this topic, maybe including your advisor, because your advisor cannot focus on this one topic. He may have 20, I had at times 25 PhD students. So I couldn't know all the details which they knew. Again, before you start writing, writing as you research. It's very useful when you work to take notes, because you may work for months, even for years, and you tend to forget things if you don't take notes. Write things down, keep a journal, and list everything what is important. And then you have material which you can use already for the final thesis. And you may have to publish, some universities require, so you may have to publish some papers before you do your PhD. So anyway, you have to write down parts of it. Take advantage of other people's writing skills and experiences. So for instance, if you have experienced co-authors in your papers, make use of them, like your advisor also. Learn by doing. Very often, I ask people to give some advice, you know, in terms of writing, and then in the next paper, the same error could be found. So this is a problem. Learn from your advisors' writings and from your more experienced co-authors. Maybe you also wish to use a language editing service. There's nothing wrong with it. Many of us don't have English, for instance, as the first language. So we may not be as good as we should be. So there's nothing wrong to use a language editing service. And again, writing helps focusing and clearing issues. When you write something down, you will find much more easily what has been forgotten, what's wrong, what do you have to add. If you keep everything in your brain only, it might not be sufficient. It's also important to help to explain things to others in the process, have discussions, have some feedback from your colleagues. Also, presenting is very important, or could be important, as you do research. Presenting also will force you to think deeper and more about your issue. It's another means for shaping your thoughts and also getting input from the outside world through discussions, questions, and answers. So this is part of the larger issue of communication. As I said before, doing research, good research is one thing, but communicating it properly is another one. So presentations, if you do some, you would not start in front of an audience of 1,000 people. That makes you too nervous, probably. Start in your own environment, in your own group. And don't be afraid there. All your colleagues are or have been in a similar situation. So get input from your colleagues. And so increase the audience as you go, piece by piece. Anyway, in many places, the defense of a master or a PhD thesis also includes a presentation and even a public discussion. Be prepared for this. Now, here I have some guidelines and tips. First, the layout. The layout is very often dictated by institutional guidelines, sizes of page margins, and so forth. I don't go now through all the details, but a layout is very often given, and you have to observe it, maybe not strictly, but roughly at least. And it's useful to have a layout already given. And the tip here is find out early enough about these regulations. It saves time. Don't start writing in a different format. Use the required format from the very beginning. And where can you find out? In your library, in the student office, graduate school, with your advisor. And it's very useful in such a case to get a thesis, a good one, from a previous student in your department, as an example. But you should get a good one, of course, not a bad one. Then you have the structure of the paper or of the thesis, how you organize chapters or sections. Again, there may not be fixed regulations, but there are certain rules which you may observe. A title page, the abstract, and the abstract should be self-contained. I will talk about abstract later. A list of contents, chapters and sections with page numbers, list of tables, diagrams and illustrations, nomenclature list. This is not necessarily required. Some people do it. And the acknowledgement. And when you do acknowledgement, don't go too far. Yeah? Only the most important contributors. Don't go many pages into acknowledgements. Then you have the main text, the chapter introducing the research, reviewing the work that has been done before, and so forth. So these are the chapters which are usually in all this kind of work. Then you should have a list of references and appendices also. Appendices, you put all these things in which would otherwise disturb the flow of reading, like big tables, well-known facts, sample calculations, background information, lengthy formula maybe. So you shouldn't disturb the flow of reading through these things. Put them into the appendices. So what are my tips here? Spend enough time in planning the structure. Again, get copies of other good theses. Talk to your advisor. And the third one, write abstract and introduction chapter last. Because in the beginning you don't know what you are getting as a result and where you go during your research. So that's why you should write introduction and abstract last. Finally, flow of contents. Writing a thesis. This is now about language. Okay, writing a thesis is like writing a novel. There must be some internal logic. It should not fall apart. The chapters should not fall apart, or they should not overlap too much. And the language should not be confusing, because if you have confusing sentences in your work, the reader may not want to read it, may give up very early, and the examiner will react with very low marks because he doesn't like bad sentences, bad formulations. So there are a number of tips here what to do and what to avoid. Repetitions, for instance. You see every once in a while that people are repeat exactly the same sentences, for instance, in the abstract and in the introduction. Avoid it. If you want to say the same thing, say it with different words. Also avoid copying other people's sentences. Develop your own style. Nowadays, with internet and digital data, I know it's very simple to get a good paragraph from the internet from somebody else and to copy it into your own work. But I tell you, your advisor will understand this. Your advisor will recognize it and will act with bad marks. May maintain a thread between adjoining chapters, define all variables. Error that is made here very often is that figures are too small, are not readable. Make sure they are readable easily. Don't use the same variables for different things. Leave out material that does not contribute directly to the discussion or development of an idea. So don't show up, don't try to show up. Also in the references, use only the most important ones. It doesn't show good results necessarily if you show 250 references. It may show, on the other hand, that your own work is redundant because so much has been published already about it. Okay, then there are some more topics. Again, I'm not going through it. Illustrations and diagrams are very important, I mentioned already. Use them in the right place, sparingly, and such that they are readable in terms of graphic style and explanations of variables. So the abstract, a few more details. The abstract provides the reader with a summary of the contents. They should be brief, but contain sufficient detail. So for instance, it should include the motivation of your work, the objectives, the methodologies employed, main results and conclusions, but only very briefly, very compact. And the abstract should be self-contained. The problem is many people may read the abstract first, and if they don't like it, if you cannot raise awareness and interest, then they may not continue reading. So again, write the abstract last and use a punchy style to attract the reader. It's a bit difficult to explain what I mean with punchy. Sharp wording, hard wording, like a boxer is hitting his partner. Introduction. Define the problems that you wish to attack and give an indication how the work will progress, and provide overview of the thesis contents. And for the introduction, the same, more or less the same holds as for the abstract. Write the introduction last. Do not repeat sentences from the abstract. Use a punchy style to attract reader. Again, the reader may only wish to read your introduction and make his decision of further reading dependent on the quality of this. Literature review. Literature is about reviews about previous work. State why the problem of the thesis is important. Describe what others have done worldwide, really, because science is fully international. There is no Brazilian science, there is no Swiss science. Science is international. Set benchmark for your own project. Justify the use of specific methodologies in your work. So the tips are here: concentrate on the most important publications. Don't overdo it, and use also primary literature. And make sure you understand what's in those publications that you cite. What I did in the past very often is in the exam ask the student to explain me what's in this publication XYZ. And if he doesn't know, he's in very bad shape, okay? Also, make sure that you don't miss the latest developments. Because if your last reference dates back 10 years and the question comes up, is it still an interesting topic? Why don't we have publications in the last few years on this topic? So make sure you don't miss the latest development. And as I said, check the international scenery, because most of these things are nowadays published in English. Everybody can check. Conclusions and recommendations for future work. Tips are: check if the project objectives have been achieved. If not, explain why. If you fail in your research, or at least partly fail, this is not necessarily bad. A negative result could be also important, could keep people away from going the same path and doing the same mistakes. Clearly distinguish your own work from other people's work. Don't mix it up. Present your conclusions and contributions concisely and factually, and write in a punchy style again. So here we have 9 steps to develop an efficient draft. I don't go through it. It's partly a kind of a repetition what I said before. But please, if you're interested, check. These are the 9 steps you should observe. Okay? Then I have a list of checkpoints to all these chapters, like introduction, main part, and so forth. And these are very useful if you are actually in the process of writing, of putting things together. You can check and compare with your own result. The body, checkpoints for the body, checkpoints for conclusions. Are they clearly related to the thesis statement in the body? Do they develop from the material, or do they seem forced and artificial? Are the main points summarized briefly? Be honest with a critical assessment of your own result. Don't try to pretend things which you have not achieved. And are the perspectives clear and concise? Don't forget also to make clear and realistic suggestions for future work. Let people know where they should continue their own work. Again, conclusions should also self-sufficient, like introduction and abstract. And there are more checkpoints which I skip here. in the sake of time. Some general advice. Think of a thesis as a series of small related tasks. Don't suffer under the fact that you think you have to write 250 pages in one go. This will fail. You should split it up, the whole work, into small related tasks and put them together finally. Don't put off writing the thesis until the end. This is what I've said already. Write as much as you can in between. Try to write 15 minutes every day. I know this is not possible, may not be possible, but it would be good if you could write on a regular basis. Don't forget to have written several successful documents before. And also realize that you are not alone. Don't isolate yourself during the thesis process, because this may lead to writer's block. Even professional writers endure occasionally writer's block. Most writers get it occasionally, but this is not a career-ending disease, but you should know how you get through such a block. Don't suffer alone, that's the main advice. Get advice from somebody else, because if not, it may get worse over time. So finally, I talked about a lot of problems here, which you have to observe. But finally, you will realize that when you complete such a thesis, it's a rewarding experience. It's a challenge and opportunity to pursue intriguing intellectual questions in a stimulating environment. It may not be possible anymore in your future environment. So make good use of the situation. You work in close cooperation with experienced people, your advisor, senior researcher, and hopefully you will have a great feeling of satisfaction after completing the job. You should be aware that you may not get into this situation anymore in the future in your professional career. Okay, so this was my presentation. If there are any questions, I try to give an answer if I can. Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Professor Gruen, for your very good presentation. I have one question. Today is very common that students are required to have several papers published before going to the final defense. And it's in some places, it is quite common to admit a thesis that is like a branch of papers.
Yeah.
I would like to ask your opinion or your advice on how to make this thesis more smooth, for example, when merging several papers. Can you give us some opinion or your experience on this?
Yeah, I have experience with all systems. You know, when I did my own PhD, it was not allowed even to publish anything, you know. So for 5 years, you were not allowed to publish anything, only at the end. Now, this was maybe okay at those times. I talk about time 50 years ago. But nowadays, you know, where things are published much more easily, faster, things are developed much faster, especially in the technology area. Maybe it's not good to do this. So you should have a kind of compromise. I don't know. I'm not convinced that having 3 peer-reviewed papers before is a good idea. I think it will distract and devaluate your thesis, you know. If you really pre-publish 3 peer-reviewed, there should be good papers anyway. Who will read your thesis afterwards? I also have experience as an advisor for the case where you simply take 3 papers and put them together. Again, I have a little bit of problem with this one because it doesn't make at the end not necessarily a good thesis. You know, it falls apart, you know, if you do this. But this is a task of the advisor. If you run through such a system, you should have somebody who controls and who makes sure that there are not too many gaps between the individual paper, but that the result is a smooth document. Yeah. But what it leads is really that the thesis itself is devaluated, you know, because all the interesting stuff has been published before. Why should you write a thesis at all then?
Okay.
That's a question, yeah.
Thank you very much. Centeno and Cheryl also would like to ask you questions before the audience.
Maybe I can go ahead. I just have one question, Dr. Gruen. Given the situation that we are in right now, I think many students who are away from their university or from their colleagues are finding it very difficult to write. Do you have any advice on how they can overcome writer's block or how they can keep their motivation up during this time?
I mean, very important is to what extent you can get advice. Now, you ask me for advice now, okay. So the student will be in a similar situation. So there should be the advisor, and the advisor should get really, advising means don't not only be there after 5 years for the exam, but be there and support the student from the very beginning. And I think that's the best configuration if the student can approach his or her advisor at very early and permanently, and not only the professor, but also senior scientists if there are any around. It's very important, you know. And also in the case where you have to produce a paper, then maybe you have some co-authors, and the co-authors should also help you to improve your writing. The issue is really don't stay by yourself, don't stay alone. Maybe your parents cannot help you, maybe your sister or brother cannot help you, but there should be people around who help you. And what's very motivating is, of course, success. If you see some early success in your work, if you work for 5 years and you see nothing coming out, that's very frustrating. Early success is very motivating, very important.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Centeno, please.
Professor Gruen, I have a relatively simple question. This is, in many cases, I have a student that is developing something based on well-known methods, no? Like, say, photogrammetry methods or geodesy methods, and it's applying to solve a certain problem. And he is always doubting if he includes the description of the methods in as a review of literature, or it should be included in the methodology. No? So sometimes we ask professors and they send everything to the review of methodology because it's already known, and others say, this is what you use, you should put it in the methodology. And what's your opinion about it?
My opinion is I'm a friend of very short documents. I don't like to read through 500 pages, you know, especially if there are methodology described that have been developed before. So Einstein. His most famous publications were all less than 15 pages. Okay. So no, I'm a friend of leaving it out if somebody has been published already in a decent way, in an understandable way. There could be a situation that certain things are not described properly, so that most people cannot understand it. Then it would be helpful to rewrite it, to re-explain it in your own work, But you should do it in the appendices, not into the main body. Again, for me, the number of pages is not a criterion for the quality of a thesis. Did I answer?
Yes, it's very clear.
As I said, it depends on the clarity of the previous publication. If a methodology has been explained clearly, then you don't have to repeat it in your own paper.
Okay,
It's
thank you,
much more important to understand where the international community stands in terms of development, and to jump in, where other people have left. This is more important to explain this clearly,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, we have some questions from the audience. The first question, we have this question, we have before another one from Denan Yandra. Could you give us a suggestion how much is a good reference for writing a thesis?
How much?
Yes, the question is from Denan Yandra. Yeah.
How much is a good reference for writing? I'm not sure.
What is a good reference? Maybe what?
That depends.
How much references? Maybe how much references?
Yes, maybe, yeah. How many references? Maybe.
Yes,
as few as possible. I had in my own thesis, which dates back a long time, I had 4 references. 4 only, which was very nice for the advisor. No, you cannot say give a number as such. It depends on the topic, of course. There are topics which are broader, where you cover more things in breadth. There are topics who are quite narrow, theory-oriented maybe. So I cannot say. But what you should observe is, don't put in references which do not contribute to your issue, which do not help. The number of references, as I said before, is not a criterion for a good thesis. And don't forget, if you put some in, you should also know what's in the reference, the content, if your advisor asks you.
Okay, there is another questions from Daniel Braga. Is what is the importance of meta-analysis in an exclusively scientific thesis?
Of math analysis.
Yes, meta-analysis.
Meta-analysis.
Meta-analysis. Meta.
If you explain me what is meta-analysis, Can you explain?
Maybe he's trying to consider when you take more papers and analyze the other scientific research. Okay. So the question comes from Daniel Braga. Maybe he can.
I think it could be interesting, especially if you relate it to philosophical reflection. It again depends on your topic. If you have a topic that is interesting enough for such, social issues or whatever, philosophical issues, then it's good to have this connection, let's put it this way. But again, it depends on the topic. There are topics which are not suitable for such a consideration, and others are. What we see actually in engineering and technology area is that very little consideration is given to social sciences, to humanities, and that's a big problem, of course, because the engineer should also understand social situations, politics, humanities. From this point of view, it's advisable to bring in this connection. Yeah.
Okay, there is a very interesting question from Alan Solomon. It's how to care about self-plagiarism. It's important thing. It is possible to use the same figure, for instance, the study area location for two different papers.
Here I have no problem. Yeah, I think if it's your own product, you can use it 2 times. If you try to copy a full paper and submit it to 2 different conferences, then you can do it, but the reviewer should realize this. This is why we have reviewers also, peer reviewers. Such a thing should be noted by the reviewer and taken out. Full paper copies, But if you have only a few things like figures and so forth, I have no problem putting it in.
Okay.
What is more of a problem if you put in figures from other people's publications, and if you don't ask, this happens also quite often, that people copy from other publications, put in their own work. This is no good, of course, unless you have talked to the other author, and you have the permission to do so. Yeah.
Okay. Any more questions?
May I ask something about this, Professor Gruen? And if someone takes an image or picture from another publication and included in his work, it just quotes the name of where it came from, is it enough, or does he need to?
No, legally it's usually not enough. You have to get the permission of the person.
The official permission of the
author. You cannot just say CC.
According to
I tell you a story. We worked on the Buddhas of Bamyan. We reconstructed the Buddhas of Bamyan. And for this purpose, we needed, in Afghanistan, we needed images. So we looked around at the internet and we found some images. And the best one were from a source in Germany, in Darmstadt. This was a guy who was visiting years before, took very good pictures. So we took those pictures naively. And the guy was actually a lawyer, and he let us do it. And after 1 year, he charged us $90 per day. So you understand? And I went through all the legal hassle. There was nothing I could do. I had to pay because we were not allowed to use them without his permission. This was from the internet, so we thought, a long time ago, it was 2002. But I was burned, and the guy did it intentionally. He waited for 1 year. He could have informed us after 1 week and could have told us, look, these are my images. You better be careful. No, he didn't do. He waited for 1 year and charged for every day. So this, burned me. And from this point on, I was very careful using other material.
And we often see that people used adapted from, and they modified somehow the picture or the figure. This is the same, applies the same.
Again, it depends how much you modify, you know. It depends how much you modify. It's finally a legal issue. So I rather stay away from this, you know, because you never, when the issue goes to court, you never know what the result will be. It is tricky. It is tricky. So my suggestion is be careful. Don't do it at all. You avoid trouble. Just spend 3-4 more hours and make your own figure.
Good advice.
Okay, we have still time for maybe a couple of questions. There is one here, and it's from Kalima Pitombeira. He's asking how to highlight the importance of the thesis when you don't find the expected result. So, what to do when you don't achieve the result you were expecting?
What to do? You have to explain in the thesis clearly why you didn't achieve it. Was it a failure on your side? You know, you can have the two situations, a failure on your side, or does the problem not allow to get the result? If it's your problem, you have a problem, really, you know. But if the problem as such cannot be solved in the way you wanted it, then it's useful for the community. It's also an interesting result. And this you should explain in the thesis, why it is an interesting result. As I said before, research is not plannable. If you start research, you never know the outcome. If you know the outcome, again, it's not a research, it's development, okay? So research can fail. There's nothing wrong. And if you explain this clearly, the failure, why, because of the problem, then it's valuable. But if your advisor can nail you down and say you made a coding problem, you made a mistake in the software or what, then you have a problem.
I think we have another question from the audience. How do you approach a prospective advisor or supervisor?
There are many ways to approach a supervisor. The first is a position is announced, you know, a PhD position is announced, you apply and you write a convincing application and the professor will take you. This is actually the normal case, I would say. The other case is that more and more I preferred to ask if I had a position, a project, to ask my colleagues, you know, the peers, do you have a good student? Do you have an excellent student? This is always a very successful method. And if you just go ahead as an applicant and write an application, this may also work. But you see such applications more and more in the internet. If I get application, although I'm not allowed to have PhD students anymore, since 2009, people still asking me, can I do a PhD thesis with you? This is a bit of a problem for me because this also shows that the applicant did not study our environment properly. Yeah? He should know that I'm retired, that I'm not active anymore, if he's really interested. But then you have these guys who send an application to 25 different universities worldwide without, you know, distinguishing. It's not good. It's not good. You should have some direct threat to the problem.
Maybe I can follow question, Dr. Gruen. So if you are still accepting PhD students or maybe other PhD supervisors, what do you think they are looking for in your application letter or in your application documents? What is the first thing that you maybe look at if someone is applying as
If
your
an
student?
if an application comes in, I mean, if it's my own student, I had a student at bachelor level, master, I follow through, and I don't need an application anyway. Then in such a case, if it's internal promotion, so to say, I don't need application because I know the guy very well. If somebody comes from outside, um, I'm not so much looking at grades, people have grades. Of course, they could be meaningful, but that's not my first priority. My first priority is the motivation and the background. Depending on the project, I know what I expect on terms of controlling methodology. And if somebody comes from an area which is too far away from the topic, it's a problem. It could be very intelligent, but it takes time to work himself into this certain issue. So the closeness of his background to the problem is also important.
Thank you very much.
And for instance, sometimes you get applications where people say, I've done this and that and this and that and this and that. This is for me not necessarily a quality thing, This could be that the guy couldn't socialize in a particular place. He has changed every half a year the working place. This is rather maybe a negative thing.
Okay, you have a question from Vagmi Patel from. Can you please elaborate how to support hypotheses in geospatial research? I'm not quite sure what is
Ahmedabad. I've been in Ahmedabad 2 times. Anyway, this is such a generic question. I don't know what to say. How can you please elaborate how to support hypotheses in geospatial research? Like in any research, if you want to support a hypothesis, you have to test it. And then according to the outcome of the test, it's verified or falsified. That I can say. It's the same in any kind of research, not only in geospatial research. Hypothesis testing. A hypothesis is nothing worth if you don't test it, if you don't verify it or falsify it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and we don't have any more questions. Maybe I think that Professor Armin would like to thanks again for your kind conference, and I think that we can close.
Thank you very much. Before you close, how many people did we have in the audience? I don't see a number.
I'm not quite sure here in YouTube. Maybe it's common that you have much more later in the YouTube, but I'm not sure. I think that maybe Geraldo can tell us. Yeah. 100.
Anyway, I wish you good luck for the rest of the seminar, of the event. Cheryl, you will be there always, I suppose.
Well, maybe I just wanted to promote it. In the most recent issue of the newsletter, you will be able to read more about the ISPRS White Elephant Club. So Dr. Gruen has actually written something about their club, and you will read it in our recent newsletter. If you want more information, please visit the official website of the ISPRS Student Consortium. Thank you so much, Dr. Gruen. Your advice is always very helpful, especially to the younger people, and you serve as an inspiration to many as well as the other White Elephant Club members. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And again, if somebody needs some more advice, he or she can email, no problem. I'm happy to answer. Thank you very much.
Okay, so this is coming to an end. Thank you again, Mr. Dr. Gruen. Thank you, George Centeno, and thank you, Cheryl, for your very kind support. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and Professor Gruen, thank you very much. It was a pleasure to see you again, and I mailed Professor Ver that you will be making conference for Brazil.
I hope so, yeah. But you know, I need an invitation.
Yeah, thank you. And I tried to look how many people were there, but it's difficult now in YouTube. So we will send you the feedback later.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you, Dr. Gruen. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye bye.